Hey everybody, what's going on? Another episode of the Heavy Metallurgy Album Club. I'm one of your co-hosts here this evening. My name is Marty. It's good to see you. Kellen from Killing for Company. How's it going?
What is up? Happy to be here.
Jim from Iwas Recordings. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Happy to talk about the metal.
TJ, my war brother, my war bro from the Glorious Dead. Good to see you. How are you?
I am much better on the inside than I look on the outside.
Well, I just have to take your word for that. Also, just want to say that we have an address finally for Thomas Channing, the winner of Friday's Panopticon drawing and t-shirt drawing. So, Thomas, I will be, if you're watching this by some strange chance, that we will be sending that package out next week. And thankfully, you're in the U.S. Yay! That worked out good. That worked out good. But yeah, I will not be here on Friday. So Alan has, I believe, Aaron the Metal Theologian and Dwayne from Lazarus channel. I don't know what. Oh yeah, I think 1980. They're talking about the year 1982. So that should be fun. I'll be hopefully drunk in the woods of northern Michigan. So it'll be fun. But we're here to talk about some metal today, as always. And let's start off by, what have we been spinning? What's something you've been playing, Kellen?
So this is the debut full-length and 2023 release by Malleus. It's kind of a blackened speed band out of the Northeast. Now, I do want to say, I do believe that friend of Heavy Metallurgy, Pat, over at Ground Zero Salem, I think he may know these guys. They're from his old neck of the woods. And it's on the Armageddon label. But I was looking here in the liner notes, and I'll see if I can find it. But there's on the thanks list, there's a Pat. And I don't know if Pat sees this, but if you're out there, see if we can pull it out. Try and find this one little spot and put it up to the camera. But I think that's Pat, our Pat, at least.
And Amanda's after it, which is Pat's wife.
Right. So I think these are his people. Yeah. Anyway, he's in the thanks list. I thought that was a cool note. But
yeah,
it's kind of a blackened speed. If anyone, the vocalist reminds me a lot of the guy from Necrofilth. It's pretty savage sort of lead vocals for a speed metal record. But anyway, been really enjoying that one a lot, and it's kind of around the subject with witchcraft and in the Northeast here in the States. So a little bit of a concept record for the genre as well.
Yeah, that album, I never got around to checking it out, but it seemed to have quite a buzz around it when it hit. A lot of people were talking about that one for sure.
For sure.
All right, Jim, what have you been spinning?
Well, if any of y'all follow me on Instagram, it's not going to be a surprise. Venom live in concert.
Classic.
Eine kleine Nacht music. This is a really great live album. This is an original press.
Is it on KTEL? No, I had the cassette of that, and it was on KTEL.
Yeah, KTEL International, Neat Records. This is the guy.
Oh man!
But yeah, great songs on here from both from Black Metal, Welcome to Hell, and Possessed. This, I mean, dude, this sounds so great. I mean, these guys. I mean, you know, Venom was pretty much always recording live anyway. So hearing them live, they sound awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a really, you know, a lot of times I don't really like metal live albums. You know, I like metal in person live, but not on album live. I'm more of a studio metal guy when it comes to listening to it, not in person. But in this case, this holds up to just listen to the records. I really, really enjoyed the hell out of spinning this. I'm super excited that my local record shop is finally got their metal section up. And
how is it?
Listening. It's, you know, it's just a start, but he had some great stuff like this and some Heathen and Merciful Fate, and so it's just the beginning, but he's dedicated to expanding it. So I'm definitely there to support, and so very happy about that. I also picked up Point of Entry from the Priest. I love this record.
I like it too. A lot of people don't.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. I know it gets a lot of shit, but I don't care, man. Desert Plains is an awesome song. And if you don't like Desert Plains, I got nothing for you. That is just a great metal song. Really love that. I did make one mistake though, and metallurgists in the chat, you got to help me. In my excitement about this new metal section, I saw a Blind Guardian. I don't have any Blind Guardian physical. I've been meaning to rectify that, so I just immediately grabbed it. And there was this little thing in my brain that said, hey, I don't recognize the title of that one. And so I was like, I just dismissed that thought. And I'm like, you know what? It's probably just a comp or something or whatever. And I just put it in my stack, and checked out, got home and realized it's this garbage.
You fucked up.
Pure classical. There is no metal on this. This is just orchestrated garbage.
Hansi showing off his talent is all that.
I got 20 seconds into this and I was done. So anybody out there that will trade me anything for this, I will do that. I've got good boxes and stuff to ship. And if you don't want to, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but I'm certainly not going to listen to it.
You can send it to me and I'll throw it away.
I'll put my
proggy enough for you, TJ.
I'll put my Iowa's Instagram handle in there, but anybody got any Canadian speed metal or thrash? I'm looking for that, or any other power metal that isn't this. I would trade. So anyway, that's what's going on with me.
Oh man, it's just as soon as you said it in the chat, I'm like, oh no, I know which one he got. I mean, out of all the Blind Guardian records, that's the one you got. It's like, what are the chances?
I should have listened to that little thought in my head. I'm like, I don't recognize the title of this, and looked it up, but I just like put it in my stack. And oh man, now this is, we're talking about pretentious. Yeah, that's what this. Yeah. Anyway,
all right, TJ.
Listening to this, I don't know, it got me spinning down a couple of rabbit holes of stuff I hadn't listened to in a while, and it was kind of cool. I don't remember if I mentioned it, if we were talking about it in the dugout after, or if we were on the chat, but I brought up a German band called Dissects. Terrible name, ridiculous name, killer thrash band. I think this one came out in like 2000. Inwards, really killer record. And then kind of a stoner rock band, U.S. band, Fireball Ministry. I had forgotten how much I liked this. And this is actually, I was listening to the Manilla Road, and I was like, I can't even remember why. It's like, oh, hey, I forgot about this band, and put this, like, God, I remember I'd spun the ones and zeros off this. I was listening to this nonstop for a long time. And then this here, I with the Dissects, I was thinking, got the brain wheel spinning. Marty had given me a promo of this 20 years ago. Whenever
what is it?
Carnal
Forge
Fire
Demon. It's like their second record, I think.
Yep.
Just the resurgence of the new wave of thrash kind of stuff. It's Swedish, so it's really aggressive. A little bit more down-tuned, smacks of At the Gates to some extent, but not really. But it's really killer if you haven't heard it. So yeah, that's where that was it. And then I bought my first Manila Road record, Crystal Logic. Finally, I started on my journey. So anyway,
right on. You have 17 more to get.
Yeah, I have time. Maybe.
Right on. For me, I've been listening to the album I picked for this week a lot, but I did get a copy of this finally, Marduk's Memento Mori. Man, this album kind of rips from start to finish. Just a great album. These guys write good fast songs, and even the slower stuff on here is quite good as well. I've never disliked this band, and they just seem to keep maintaining, if not getting a little bit better. So this might be my next pick, but yeah, we're here today to talk about this album, Atlantis Rising by Manilla Road. Came out 2001. It's the band's comeback album, more or less. And a little bit of information, thanks to our friends at Wikipedia. Manilla Road was an American heavy metal band from Wichita, Kansas, founded by Mark the Shark Shelton on vocals and guitar, and Scott Scooter Park bass guitar, beginning in 1977. The early years of Manilla Road were spent playing mostly progressive rock and space rock, but eventually became noticeably heavier with time, the band's later heavy metal sound becoming more and more apparent with the release of Metal in 82. I'll skip that one part. After a major breakup in 92, the band was reformed by Shelton in the mid-90s, although without co-founder Scott Park and a record label. The following years for Manilla Road were spent mostly by taking gigs in underground Midwestern shows without the release of any new material. Seemingly forgotten, Manilla Road was rediscovered by the metal scene after performing at Bang Your Head Festival in 2000, which resulted in the band signing a new record deal and eventual release of Atlantis Rising in 2001 and Spiral Castle in 2002. The second era of Manilla Road continued until the death of founder Mark Shelton, who died in 2018, the day after the band played in an outdoor festival in Germany. So, yes, Atlantis Rising. Jim, we're going to start with you today. What are your first impressions of this record?
Well, I'm a Manilla Road fan. Not as learned of them as Mr. Marty is, but I have Crystal Logic in my collection, and Mystification's actually my favorite album by them. This is an absolute stunning return to form, after that hiatus for them. I knew what I was getting into. I love Mark Shelton's guitar playing. And even though I have to admit, when I first heard Mark the Shark's voice, like it took me some getting used to, I love that voice now. And hearing it on this record, it's strong and powerful. His melody lines, both on the guitar and vocally, are super strong, and the ballads are cool, the lyrics are great. I love his combination of Norse mythology and HP Lovecraftian themes. I think it's really cool that he combines those lyrically on this record. So first impressions was I was excited about doing this deep dive into this record, and it absolutely did not disappoint. I loved every spin, and this is just a band that for me completely embodies the heavy metal ethos. You know what I mean? And it just gets exciting whenever I think about their contribution, and wondering, like, from one song to the next, like, because I'm not as familiar with this album as I am the earlier stuff, but like, what's coming next? Where's this going to take me? It was really fun familiarizing myself with this record.
Kellen.
So kind of a known quantity. It's, I guess, a little bit different than a lot of our like first impression, where you kind of know it, jump into the record and you've no idea what you're getting in for. I know this band, I know this era of this band, I know the transition that happens in the mid 80s once they become a bit more thrash focused. So I kind of, nothing was really surprising about returning to Atlantis Rising. But I did spend a good amount of time trying to think about what was gained in the, I guess, almost a decade throughout the 90s that they sort of, I guess, took off. So what Atlantis Rising and what really 3 records in 2 years offered. I mean, it's kind of an explosion back onto the scene, and some really, really, really great releases on top of each other. So it was an interesting sort of revisiting that, because I think when you're talking about Manilla Road at this point in time, it's difficult to talk about an album in isolation, for me at least. you're constantly sort of weighing a record against a body of work that is incredibly impressive and influential. So I had tons of fun. I knew I was going to love it, but we'll kind of get into the details later.
Right on. TJ.
Yeah, so my journey with this band is a little more recent. I bought a tape. I pulled it out of a bin at a local Giant Way back in 80, whatever it was. And at that time in my life, I bought that tape and I put it on and I was like, these guys suck. And I threw it in the trash. I didn't like it.
It was Out of the Abyss is the tape you bought, by the way.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's the one it was.
Yeah.
And I just back then, and it's funny, when I was a kid, it's like, Black Sabbath can do it, Rush can do it, but this band, these guys are dumb, and that's just how my brain worked back then, and I don't know, I got, what can I say? And, and coming to it, then, all of a sudden one day Marty just decides, hey, these guys are cool. Have you ever listened to these guys? I'm like, well, I had a tape, and he starts playing them at Metal Night and shit. And it's like, God, this is really good. This is like all the crap that I, now, I'm like, this is really good. And so, Marty always, whenever we're hanging, he usually whips it out. So it's like, I've got, I'm more familiar. I remember the earlier stuff and what have you. And with this record, it's like, and I know they did, I know the kind of the history with them. So there was like the lull in the middle or whatever. And there's the early string of records, and then they came back. And, with this one, I was like, I it just, my first impression of this was it's a little mixed, but again, I like it. I really did enjoy it, but I just found myself wanting to listen to Crystal Logic or Open the Gates more. So I just feel like that I enjoy that more. But I wouldn't say it's like I really like this record, and I'm going to buy this record, and and I'd listen to it again. Like I said, my feelings are a little, Marty and I have been commiserating about it a little bit already, and so it's like my opinions on it. I have some nitpicks and some things, but my first impressions were a little just kind of like, well, I wanted it to be what it wasn't, but Manilla Road. I don't know if that makes any sense, but anyway, I'm rambling, so just move along.
Well, the reason why I picked this album is because I'm in the mood to listen to Manilla Road, and this album, Atlantis Rising, this promo came in the mail when it came out back in the day in 2001, and the only other Manilla Road I had ever heard at that point was a mixtape that Jeff Wagner, my friend, made for me. He kind of put like all the early classics on a mixtape, made up a little cover for it, and which I've passed on to a friend. But I like that tape, but this thing came in and I like, oh, Manilla Road, okay, new album, I'll check it out. And this album, I was kind of blown away by this record. We'll get into it, but the songs at their core are very simplistic. But the way the songs are written and the playing on it and the voices and all of it together is fantastic. I love it. It's grown on me even more so over the years. Like, I've probably spun this 20 times this week. I've just been in the mood for Manilla Road. I figure I'm just going to immerse myself in this record again. And it, not a dull moment on the record, to be honest. So yeah, that's why I picked it. And the question, kind of long, sorry. Atlantis Rising is a comeback album of Manilla Road after Mark laid the band to rest 9 years previous. With his return, there seemed to be a renewed fascination with the band and the back catalog in the early 2000s metal scene, breathing new life into this dedicated and unique entity. From a band born out of the 70s, likely influenced by hard rock, prog, and other non-metal musical entities, how do you see Manilla Road and other bands like them, such as Kira Thungal, influencing a new generation of metalheads and bands, even when the style they have always played is often on the fringes of what is popular? Kellen.
Okay. So I guess when I first got your question, I'll just kind of give a brief history about this entire world of heavy metal for me personally, because I kind of felt okay, like for younger bands, new generation. I had like when I started to listen to this kind of music, there was something totally different about specifically another band that is like Borkus Helm. I think maybe deserving to be thrown in here.
Good band.
Holding on to a little bit of like 70s sort of prog stuff.
Yep.
When I think of the more epic heavy metal bands that I was exposed to, it was a bit more like over the top. If you're looking at something like Manowar, they're just, it's so blatantly kind of cliche metal, and that's what you love about it, right?
Yeah.
And then I think what made Manilla Road and Kirith Ungol, when you looked at it purely based on the artwork. So obviously Michael Whalen's influence for Kirith Ungol. The albums that grabbed me were the artwork associated with Open the Gates and The Deluge by Eric Lanois.
Yeah.
I mean, just gorgeous album artwork.
Yeah.
So it looked different. And then you actually play the records, and there's something about this that you kind of feel like you're unearthing something from an ancient time. Like it's not completely kept well. Like it's potentially eroded. We can get into the production later on, but it's something that always sort of marred, I think, Manilla Road through the years is a kind of production style. And Kirith Ungol, they just sound odd. Like they don't quite completely fit in a way like traditional heavy metal should sound. And that always made them a bit of intrigue of it, like
because of the vocals. Both bands have weird vocalists.
Both are weird vocalists, but even like some of the guitar like tone and production choices here make it strange for me as well. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just different. And
kind of read my mind on this, Kellen.
Okay. I do also think probably the third point that I want to bring your attention to is when I think about a younger generation discovering quintessential 1980s bands. When I think about the other major bands that were sort of, or genres even, that were circulating in the 1980s, predominantly it's been led like a thrash versus glam conversation in America specifically. Those genres, I think, are so deeply entrenched in the iconography of the 1980s that when you hear them or even look at them from in a new context here in the 21st century, it's just so blatantly from a different time period. Between this sound being hard to pin down and odd to characterize, and the symbols, the themes, all the world that they inhabit lyrically, visually, all of that is timeless in a way that isn't defined by the 1980s. Epic heavy metal pulled from ancient mythology in terms of the kind of themes, subject matter that they wanted to explore. And I don't feel that is so explicitly dated in the way that I think thrash metal is, in terms of like the social political context that emerges, or like glam sort of, we're going to take, Kiss and the New York Dolls and throw it on the Sunset Strip with pornography and cocaine. Like it's just, that whole world to me is beautifully 1980 something. I don't feel that way about Manilla Road. So when they were able to emerge in the 21st century with Atlantis Rising, they went back to their sort of, bread and butter, and it was just as relevant in the 21st century as it was back in the mid 1980s.
Totally agree with that. Yeah.
I really think they grabbed a hold of something and understood, like, even if it wasn't in the present, that it would transcend, when they went back to explore it. Not only was it ultimately who they were as a band, but it was timeless in terms of subject matter that you could explore and be relevant for heavy metal for the decades to come. So I don't, it's something that when I was going back and exploring it, I was able to hold on to it in a way that didn't feel dated or belonging to a different generation in the way that thrash or glam did for people who were growing up with it in the 1980s. So I think that's a major difference relative to a lot of the bands that were, more popular in the 1980s, but yet somehow had a lifespan or a ceiling that they ran into based on their genre was so much consumed in sort of a very temporary moment in metal history.
Well said, Jim.
Frosty said something in the chat that really stuck out to me. He said, epic storytelling transcends all genres. And I completely agree. And I think that is, to Kellen's point, like, what keeps bands like this relevant when they came from the early 80s, as opposed to many other bands of that same time period that didn't. And I think that that's really what it is, besides like the excellent musicianship, the very original guitar playing and vocals that are initially hard to take, but once you get used to it, you see that they're just utterly unique. But even deeper than that, Manila Road has a mysteriousness about it that I think is a result of their lyrical content. Mark has always told stories, even on their earliest albums, it just, and you're hearing them and you want to know more, like, why am I lost in Necropolis? You know what I mean? Like what's happening there? How did I get here? And for me, Flight of the Ravens, I just, every time I listen to that song, every time it came back around this week, I wanted to hear that story again. I wanted to understand what was happening. I wanted to know the end result of that sort of like, epilogue that was going on in the context of the album. And I think that how a band like this can, not only have a relevance, but an inspirational factor to younger bands is that storytelling, that mystery, that, that I think, can, live beyond, trends and, of the moment type lyrics, which, thrash, though I love it dearly, was certainly a victim of. It's hard to like, yeah, Reagan era, blah blah blah. I mean, it's been 40 years now.
Nuclear waste sucks, bro.
Yeah, right.
Let's eat some pizza.
Toxic Holocaust and all that. And I still love that. I'm a thrash kid, but there's no mystery to it. It's very concrete. It's in your face, and not only is it in your face, but it's very much a moment of its time. But when you have a band, a truly epic heavy metal band like Manilla Road, in concept and execution and in lyrical content, then I think it does, to Kellen's point, it creates a timelessness, and it, you don't know where to put them on that timeline because, not only is it great storytelling, but he mixes, he mixes genres, he mixes different, authors and different legends, and in a way kind of creates his own myth, with the way that he ties in all these other influences lyrically. And as a listener and as a seeker, and when, especially if you're young and you really, that's when you start to get your deep dive and you start to go back to where metal comes from. It's that mystery that's your driver. It's that mystery that's your I don't want to say guiding light, but your darkened path, that leads you forward. And in a band like this, I think is always, for those that are, wanting to know what is, without any other, adjectives or suffixes, what is just heavy metal. And I think Manilla Road is just heavy metal. And the reason why is because of that, aura that is hard to grasp. It's hard to pin them down, and that sort of, it's an overused phrase, but in this context, I think it works, is, that sort of X factor that a band can have where people can't really put their finger on it. That's inspirational because you as a musician, if you're a young person coming up, a young listener or a young musician, inspired to play this style of music, that's what you want. You want to create, you know, an atmosphere, or, you know, or a spiritual experience that makes the listener want to understand. And that's what I get when I hear Manilla Road is, you know, I want to understand, you know. So that's my take.
All right. Good one. TJ.
So Manila Road is like, they are a uniquely singular entity as a band. Nobody sonically translates in any way like they do. From first to last, there's just nothing that sounds that way. And, you know, and Marty, you know, his question, like Kira Thungal, again, you know,
Dark Quarter can be added to that list too. I didn't write them down, but they were weird Italian epic metal.
But
Great.
you know, for I think for these bands, because remind me, Kira Thungal, they're from the States, or are they?
Yeah,
that's right.
They're just about to put out a new album. The guy from Night Demon
I just saw
formed them.
I just saw a thing on the interwebs about that, but they're contemporaries of each other. They're so uniquely individual. You know, they're sonically, they're just doing but it's like you can tell, like, where with Kira Thungal, you know, to my ears anyway, like the first record, you know, they're smacking at Rush real hard. To me, that's what my impression of that. But then with Manilla Road, it's like you go to the very first record, you go to Invasion, and you listen to that, and it's like you can hear all the kind of bizarre B-tier space rock bands that they were kind of emulating with that. And then there's this weird transition, you know, where the 80s happen. Somebody picked up something that was heavy, and Mark's like, hey, you know what? And then off we go into, you know, Open the Gates and Crystal Logic and whatever. And there's just this, you know, this dynamic shift in the sound that stays consistent from there up until, you know, you get to the, you know, they drop off, and then the 2000s happen, whatever. And but it's still, you know, even with this record, it still sounds like them. And it's so uniquely consistent, but so weird, you know, so different than anything. And that's, I think, the thing about them that shines so much about what they are and the influence that they're having. I think it's interesting how, I mean, they weren't really on anybody's radar except maybe their diehard fans, and, you know, and then all of a sudden they're back, and everybody, you know, and they're playing the fest, and they're doing the thing, and they're getting all this attention, rightly deserved. And so it's, you know, I don't know, you know, with your question, Marty, you know, I don't know where to really go with it, but I think that the influence that they're playing now, you know, unfortunately, in Mark's, you know, after Mark's passing, it's unfortunate that he can't be here, you know, to be a more of a part of that. But at the same time, it's pretty obvious the band, you know, the people that enjoy, I mean, it's like why I enjoy this band is because of how different they sound. But it's like you I can pick up on, you know, why they sound like they sound. You know, I can hear, you know, the things for, you know, the early influences, but at the same time, the way they translate it into their songs is just so, you know, Mark's guitar, you know, his writing is so uniquely his. And you know, whether it's just organic or a conscious effort to not, you know, he's like, well, this riff sounds so much like this, so I'm going to flip it on its head and make it sound like this, so it doesn't sound like that. But that was his inspiration, you know, if that makes any sense. But again, they're just the dynamic of this band being, it's so hard to kind of, you can't pin it down. You know, you can't just look at any one of these records and just be like, oh, well, you know, this came out of this and this is part of that. But that's, again, this is what, you know, any of the great bands, any of the bands that we adore, or any that even come out of this era, that, you know, it's like, who sounds like Dio, who sounds like, you know, who can do that, you know. Not that, don't mind the comparison, I'm just saying in terms of uniquely singular performers, you know. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, but like you're both saying, is their you know, their uniqueness, the oddity of how they translate their, you know, sonically. It's just what makes them, and their influence is obvious. You know, people are being influenced by them now, to me, for obvious reasons, because of how unique they are, because of what makes them stand out so much from the crowd, because it's just they're such a very singular band, and anything, there's really just nothing like them, you know, and they are like, and to Jim, you know, I agree, they are just a heavy metal band. They kind of they're the epitome of kind of just like heavy metal, you know, this whatever you could, you know, the epic tag gets thrown around a little bit in some of the stuff I was reading, and I think that's fair.
Well, it's kind of a subgenre of heavy metal, epic metal.
Right, yeah, sure. And I think that's a fair point to make about their style, but ultimately I think that they live in that place. Like Jim says, it's just, you know, if you want to, somebody who says, you know, recommend to me just a solid, you know, unique, excellent heavy metal band, you know, this would be a go-to group to tell anybody about. So I don't know if I really answered your question at all, but
well, it was more of a discussion type of, I don't think there's a real answer to this question, to be honest.
Well, you didn't get one from me, so whatever.
Yep. No. And the follow up on what all you guys have said, I you know, we're talking about it, band practice, and you know, it's interesting because this one thing that sets this band apart from a lot of bands, you know, from the era they came from, is they just strike me as a very salt of the earth working man's band. They're not necessarily the flashiest band. They're not necessarily, you know, controversial. You know, they have no real, the marketable qualities of the band is kind of tough, I would think. But like, you know, what everybody has said here, what sets this band apart, first of all, is the songwriting, the guitar playing, and, you know, the early album, Shelton's vocals. I mean, that it's kind of like the King Diamond thing. Yeah, either you love it or you hate it. And when I first heard, you know, like Necropolis, I'm like, man, I don't know about these vocals, but once the light switch is clicked on, it's a very endearing quality to this band. And you start looking overseas. So the Greeks were very influenced, you know, the Greek epic metal bands, some Italian bands. You got what? Doomsword. What's the band that you picked, Kellen, that we covered? I can't remember.
Roar.
Battle Roar, which Mark was involved a little bit with. You know, he sang on some songs here and there over the couple of their albums. And I hear those bands. I mean, I have some Doomsword. I have a Battle Roar record. I've got, you know, a handful of these epic bands, and they're influenced by Manilla Road, Kirthungel, maybe a little bit of Dark Quarterer, but it's not the same. It just, it seems like you start, you know, dubbing a cassette. You know, the immediate dub after the first dub is always the best, and after it gets less and less and less. That's what a lot of these bands sound like, a lesser copy of, you know, Manilla Road is born out of the 70s, the hard rock influence, the prog, the whatever else influence, and you know, their weird influences. Maybe Mark heard Metallica, and that's when they started getting heavier. I don't know, but they arrived at that sound organically, whereas these younger bands like the Doom Swords and the Battle Roars, I mean, they're influenced by Manilla Road. So, and their take on it just doesn't seem as, it's good, it just isn't as good. And they're also even trying to mimic the lo-fi, or the, you know, maybe not perfect singing, or maybe not perfect guitar playing. It's weird, the shit that they're highlighting, you know, but you know, the only thing that never really sounded perfect to me with Manilla Road albums, which we'll talk about a little bit tonight, is the productions. Like Kellen already, the playing isn't an issue. The songwriting isn't an issue. And if you like the vocals, and he's the same with Kira Thungal, if you look, the vocals are tough to get by on that too. That guy sounds like he is singing from the corns on the bottom of his feet all the way up. It's just amazing how that guy is just the way he screams is crazy. But I'm just glad that, I didn't know Mark Shelton. I have friends that did know him and said he was a great guy. And I'm glad he got this band back together, because before the breakup, it was a bit of a bumpy ride. Course of Chaos, the drummer decided, I'm going to program drums for this record. I still kind of like the record, but it had to grow on me. The album after that, Spiral Architect, was supposed to be Mark's solo album. And there's like 1 or 2 songs on there that sound like Manilla Road-ish. The rest of it sounds like glam metal. It's not good. It's not a good record. That was in 92. And then, of course, it broke up after that, because obviously things were probably tough for a band like this. Never got on a big label, never got the right distribution. And, you can't blame people for not. I mean, I never heard of Manilla Road until, Jeff made me that comp tape. And if I did hear it like TJ back in the day, I probably wouldn't have liked it, to be completely honest. I heard it at the right time, and then sealing the deal by getting this, it was all like, all of a sudden I got it. And then it was just a mad rush to get everything, so I don't know if I'm answering this question either, but I'm glad that Mark brought the band back and secured. I mean, the biggest win in this reformation is Brian Patrick, Hell Roadie Patrick. He was a roadie for the band, friend of the band, and he stepped in as vocalist. Mark blew out his vocal cords. I can't remember what he said, if it was on Open the Gates or no, wait. It might have been The Deluge. He was recording one of the albums and he fried his voice. It was never the same after that. Plus, he was a smoker. And so he wanted a vocalist that could step in and help him. He never gave up singing. He still sings on these records. You can tell when he sings on this. It's a very gristled style, but Brian sounded like a younger, more improved version of Mark in a lot of ways. Plus, he could bring the screams. And on later albums like this, there's a little bit of King Diamond type screams on here. I mean, so the new life was Mark and Brian, and whoever else they had. And Mark and Brian actually played drums on this record too. I'm wandering here, but yeah, let's move on. I don't know. There's no answer to this question. I just I wanted to talk about what sort of influence these bands had, and it's just weird that it's still such a small niche of the metal scene. There's still epic bands, and I know the remaining guys of Manilla Road, they've got a new band out. I can't remember the name of it. I've been wanting to check it out. I can't remember who the guitar player they found, but I'll have to investigate that. I'm sure it's going to be good. But let's talk about the musicality and composition of Atlantis Rising. We'll start with you, TJ.
I love the songwriting. I love how clear and concise it is on this. There are some moments where he leans on repetition a little bit in some of these riffs that it's just, it doesn't ruin anything for me. It's just so kind of obvious, that he gets into these parts, but they're solid riffs and they're good. It's just a few times, a couple of different tracks where it just kind of sticks out a lot. But the songwriting always, it just makes up for it. Everything is just so kind of on purpose and just put together really well. It's not flashy, but it's interesting. For me, the acoustic stuff on this, the affected stuff, like what is that? The Lemuria.
Yeah.
I'm getting ahead of myself, but that shit is just absolute gold. That piece. And that delay effect that he's doing with the taps on, I mean, it sounds aquatic. It sounds like water. It was obviously intentional. It's super cool.
It's a cool aesthetic. They follow it. The theme goes through it, kind of like Mayhem's
I can certainly guarantee you that I will attempt to rip that off at some point. It's absolutely killer. I love stuff like that. I don't do it as much as I would like to, because I don't get a lot of time to sit in front of my effects boxes, but I like to try to conjure stuff like that because it's really cool. But it's like I said, there's some riffs that get a little bit overused, I think. But otherwise it's, the songs are just so well put together, and they're just straightforward. There's nothing, nothing flashy about them. Some of them are a little bit longer than others, but that, and Marty, we were talking about this earlier, and it's just kind of the way the riffs are just to get from, measure to measure, to get through 4 bars, they're just long. And it may not have even been intentional. One of the longest songs I ever wrote was like 8 minutes. And the only reason was because the verse riff was so long, and it wasn't intentional. It's just the way the piece fell together,
He writes longer phrases instead of,
Well,
he doesn't turn around when, the quick turnaround.
And I think, and there's a lot of purpose in that. He's trying to accommodate to get to solos, and he's trying to accommodate for certain vocal cadences and things like that. And so there's reasons that he does it too. But again, it's not, the repetitive stuff. It's just, it is what it is. I think, but by and large, it all kind of gets made up for just the solidness of all the writing on this. Really beyond that, I don't really have, anything else. Again, like I say, I think for me on this particular record, I think the acoustic stuff, those are kind of the big winners for me on this. I think they were just so kind of perfect. The emotion and the mood in them, and just the delivery on them was just so well done. But it all fits in context with the whole record. This record is pretty well woven together with his theme and the effects and the things that he's trying to do. When he brings the whole Atlantis Rising effects in, and at the end, and you do get the sense he's trying to convey of the rise and the fall into the sea of the continent or whatever, and he's bringing these things together. So it's really cool. So yeah, that's,
All right, Jim.
I actually agree with TJ a lot about specifically about like the acoustic moments, the quieter moments on the record are like my favorites. I as well love Lemuria. That crazy finger tapping effect thing. I mean, every time I hear that, I feel like I'm just taken away. I already mentioned earlier Flight of the Ravens. There's to be able to conjure up that level of storytelling, but also have an emotion about it where it's not just like delivered like in a really cold kind of sterile way where someone's just reciting to you, but to be able to imbue these words with feeling and and depth, that's just powerful. That's magic in itself, and I'm not even sure how they do it, but they do it, and it's palpable, I think on this album from beginning to end. So yeah, the construction of these, the placement of them, talk about musicality and composition. I think also what's really important in this album is where they place these songs. It gives it a lot of balance. When it starts getting heavier and you're like, is this still Manila Road? And then it pulls it back and you get this quieter moment. And then you're like, yeah, it's still Manila Road, and, and then, gets a little riff-tastic for a moment, but then a really cool, just claws to the sky solo comes on, and just lifts you up there and takes you up to another level. And it's really craftsmanship. I mean, that's what this is. These guys craft songs well, and and just and I don't know that it's even something that you can really learn. I think that you can get better at it with time, but I think that there are some musicians that are just capable of delivering a journey on every song, and then able to carry that feeling of forward movement throughout an album. And so to me, and let's just go ahead and say it. I mean, Shelton is a shredder. He's an incredible guitar player. His leads are amazing. The arrangements are really cool. I do hear some Alex Lifeson from Rush. I hear that influence in his rhythm playing. The sort of hitting all the strings, you know, big picked chords, you know, with, you know, a lot of, you know, with movement of the bass around it, you know, that definitely gives me, like, in their best moments, like a Rush kind of a vibe, more like earlier Rush rather than later, but still always more metal than anything else. And that's why I prefer these guys over them. But despite that, I think, you know, really it's always in service of the song with them. You know, Mark isn't, you know, look at me. He's like, listen to us, you know, and when you can sort of detach, you know, yourself, you know, from, like, you know, an absorption of the light, you know, as a badass musician, which he invariably is, and like turn that around and say, listen to this song as a whole, and do it again and again and again from track 1 to track 10. I mean, that shows, you know, maturity as a musician, but I think that also shows genius, because, you know, you are doing what a record is supposed to do. You're transporting the listener, and that's absolutely all what Mark is about. That's what Manilla Road is about, and that's what Atlantis Rising is about. I do have a question for you, Marty, though. I am incapable of telling when Brian's singing and when Mark's singing. Like, do you know?
Mark has got more of a gristled rasp to his voice.
Yeah, okay. I'll try to.
They're very similar. Brian, he's a great guy to step in, because he can do the weird old. He can sing the old stuff and sound great. It's right. You don't. It doesn't bum me out that Mark isn't singing it, because his voice is kind of roached after all the years, but it's still cool. It's just really raspy, and
I'll try.
When you listen to the album back again, when you hear the raspier, maybe not as strong, but lower raspier, that's typically Mark. To my ears.
Do they collaborate on every song? Is it a trade-off on every song?
Not every song, but a lot of songs.
Okay, yeah. Great. All right, thanks. Didn't want to derail there. I was just curious.
No, it's all cool. No good. Kellen.
So I guess this kind of continues where they ended at the end of the 1980s, early 90s, where they were sort of becoming a little bit more sort of thrash heavy influenced, which is, I think they probably saw themselves. I mean, I don't want to, like, this is me speculating, but looked at like more extreme metal and sort of saw a greater sense of kinship than other parts of the metal community. Like, something about how underground they were. Just in my mind, they always seemed like they envisioned themselves as sharing a stage or having more in common with that part of the metal world. So by somewhere, like, once you get into really the deluge and the back end of the 1980s, there's a whole lot more sort of up-tempo thrash influence going on in their songwriting.
But never really thrash, hinting at it.
Right.
I never really got a straight up thrash vibe.
But what's interesting about the songwriting on this record, and we get to the track listing, I'll maybe spend more time, but like there were a few moments specifically towards the end of this record on Siege of Atland and War of the Gods, when they're like, I mean, I don't know, Mark's voice rescues them, and to some degree, from ever being fully grouped in with that kind of genre.
Yeah.
But if you're purely looking at like an up-tempo, palm muted sort of riffing style, there, these furious moments of release on those tracks. The beginning to Siege of Atland is incredibly aggressive
and dissonant. A lot of dissonant type of chords in there too.
And there is like another vocalist that they rope in here for Megalodon, I think, on the first track as well.
Actually, it's on Atlantis Rising. It was I wrote it down.
Okay, Darby Pentecost. There we go.
Yep, he was from the band. He was from a goofy Stompin' Ground or something was the name of the band he was from.
I'm sure Wichita Crew, like good.
Yeah, he might have been on Megalodon too, but it just says special guest vocals on Atlantis. Oh, on maybe not the song Atlantis Rising, but on the album. He might have been on a couple things. When I saw them, they played at the Kalamazoo Classic Metal Fest when this album came out, and he came on and did the song with them. Okay. He came with the crew, so it must have been a Wichita Crew thing. Like, you're right. Anyway, go ahead.
But there's a more extreme sort of like the aggressive vocals are here as well. So there's plenty of aggression on this record which I think to my ears helped them sort of turn the corner into the 21st century. And it sort of shaped a lot of the direction of the band going forward, at least all the way through. I mean, I probably Gates of Fire, after Gates of Fire into Voyager, they become a bit more like melancholic, and there's a different kind of sound to their.
They get a little bit more epic. Like Voyager's got some very epic stuff on it, even though the production is rough, man. And after that, the production stays consistently rough until the last couple albums. Like
it's
the last
the
album,
hallmark of the band. It's the hallmark of the band, for sure. But
they recorded they're a very DIY ethos. They were kind of a punk thing.
I mean, there's a weird sort of like the ethos of the band to me are these like 1970s sort of like traveler hippies that are also could be in a biker gang, like
smoking a ton of weed. Yeah. You could tell. I mean, his playing style is very free flowing. He just would get ripped high and just start jamming. I dig that. It's cool. It sounds good.
So I know I'm going to leave space here for Jim to talk about the bass playing here by Mark Anderson. But Mark Anderson and Scott Peters, they're on this and Spiral Castle, the record that follows, I believe. Yeah. And it sounds to me they came to this band almost like already a fan of the previous discography, and were like, we want to be a part of this and let Shelton do his thing. Because they hold it down, and the playing here is exceptional on the back end. But what it lets Mark do is his solo style is so freewheeling. Yeah. I think he'll just like find a groove, settle into it, and just sort of take the foot off the brakes and see what happens. That and the production style for me always made it a very unique sort of tenor to his guitar style. But I guess the last piece, and I want to add to the songwriting here, is I think more than what potentially the earlier 1980s records offered was a greater understanding of what the epic heavy metal genre was. Like they had sort of stewed over that concept and identity and brought it to record here in a way, like between the sort of the lapping of the waves that come in and out of this record. There's a greater sense of like, we need to completely encapsulate the world that we are lyrically and visually describing. And I think it's all over this sonically. Like it sounds like an epic heavy metal record in terms of building this world that Mark's sort of writing about. So in a way that I feel like the Deluge kind of got to it at times, like there's a little bit of the waves thing happening there as well, but not with the same sort of precision and vision that you get here on this record. So,
and I got to say, you made mention of the drums and the bass. Those are two elements that have always been very. I mean, because if you look at it, Manila Road has always been, the early stuff is a power trio, always a power trio, and the bass player he always had was badass. I mean, he always had guys that filled in those spaces. They fill it up, and they'd always had, Scott Parks, great drummer. He always had great drummers, really busy, a lot of really cool fills and stuff. As a three-piece, because they would go out live as a three-piece, and they would fill in the space, man. They would sound bigger than most three-pieces do live, which is awesome to me. But anyway, songwriting, composition. For me, I mean, you guys have all touched upon this. That I think compositionally, the record itself, I mean, TJ said it right off the bat. The way the album flows from start to finish is very cool. You got the theme of water, the waves. I mean, you got the theme of Atlantis, and some other things mixed all in there together. Sure. But the overall theme is water and rising and falling of empires or whatever. And the way the songs, I mean, all the heavy songs have a similarity to them, which might also kind of play on TJ saying, well, there's a lot of sameness in some of these, which they're all kind of come from a same place, I think. But I think the riffs within each song are unique enough to separate that out. They break songs up nicely with the clean and or acoustic bits. And towards the end of the album, the last three songs, the heavy songs, they start to get more intense. The more dissonant chords come in. Moments of like, there's some double bass on here. There's some, palm muted, faster picking. And it almost brings the album to a crescendo right at the last song, which is very compositionally very cool. And the songwriting is very smart. I like the fact that, I mean, that's one reason why the first band that comes to mind, of course, is Burzum. It is simple lines, simple musical lines, but cool layers over the top. And that, I'm not saying that Manila Road is Burzum, but I'm saying there's a simplicity to the riffs. If you have a cool riff that stands good on its own as your foundation, the crap you put on top of it is only going to bring it up. And granted, his solo work is fantastic. That helps. And there's some interesting guitar harmonies that he pulls off, that which he pans left or hard right, which is, we'll get into production here in a minute, but there's just an epic, about midpoint of this record, it gets very epic. They're very triumphant feeling at times. And but for me, I mean, I love all of this stuff, all the elements, all the foundation, building it up. The icing on the cake of this record is the singing. I love it. I love it. It's not overbearing. It's not over the top. It's smart. It's melodious. It's got a lot of emotion to it. It really sells the lyrics. I really like how they place the lyrics over the pieces of music. You write a spacious enough bottom riff, you have room to do some things. Even though these guys aren't, falsetto, operatic type singing, there's a lot of emotion and feeling here. And, Brian Patrick is a great counterpart to Mark. And, you watch a bunch of live stuff on YouTube. Sometimes they sing together. Sometimes they switch off. Sometimes Mark just sings. Sometimes Brian just sings. They complement each other great, because Brian is very much of the Mark Shelton school of singing. He can emulate that style perfectly. And I think one thing that it does is, this modern return of Manila Road, maybe the vocals are a little less strange. They're a little bit, they're familiar enough. It sounds like Manila Road, but there's not the, Necropolis, lost in Necropolis, very nasally. It's weird, but the weirdness is kind of downplayed a little bit. And it's just really solid singing. I mean, I like the weirdness, don't get me wrong, but it's just very good singing on this record. I like it. And, I was listening a lot to this record this week, and I'm listening to the riffs, listening to just the riffs themselves and some of the things he does. I'm not saying I'm influenced by him. I'm not saying I'm as good as a guitar player, because I'm not, but I'm just saying I kind of get where he's coming from. He could tell he's just jamming it out. He's got a feel. He's in a pocket. I do the same thing. I might not be playing the same right notes, but I can air guitar along with his riffs. Like, I could see myself coming up with this riff, because I know where he's coming from as kind of an emotional jamming out kind of player. Anyway, let's talk about the production of this record. TJ, we'll start with you.
So, and again, I realize production for this band, again, my journey with them is still kind of evolving, but production like to Kellen's point, it's always been kind of a thing. Some better than others, whatever. But with this, it's weird, because it doesn't ruin the listening experience for me. It doesn't kill the record for me. But it's like his guitar tone, his lead tone is it is awful. It is so bad on this. The lead tone.
I think the rhythm guitar tone is a little worse than the lead tone.
They're both bad, but his lead tone is just terrible. I mean, it just reminds me of the budget stomp box PV Backstage Plus crap I had when I was a kid. It's so bad. But the thing about it is like when the song envelops him, when it all comes together, it all kind of just
it works.
It just works itself out in the wash. And it's really funny. You're listening to it, and he breaks in, and that lead, and it's just like, oh my God, it's just like somebody threw a steak on on a sizzling hot pan. It's just like, wow. But then the song builds up around it, and then it's like, oh, it's like, what did I say to you earlier? It's like you smack your thumb with a hammer, and you got this big beat red thumb. It's still a thumb, but it's just it's sticking out, but it's still doing what it's supposed to do. It's like it works, and it's just I don't know, and obviously these guys, I've seen the videos of them practicing in that fucking water heater
in a room, yeah. And he's standing next to this dual stack.
He's got his fucking his Marshall stack standing there. And there he's standing in the
right in front of him, and Brian is in like the hallway singing. It's like crazy. It's super small rehearsal space.
And I laugh because it's like I used to do this, my old band, we used to practice with full stacks and stuff. So it's like, it's like he's a kindred spirit, brother. But it's just funny, but it's more, I don't know how to explain my, it's like I said earlier, I was like, I have these kind of mixed feelings about, it's like, I like this record. I will own this record, but it's just kind of, but I don't know. I guess it's just all kind of part and parcel for what makes this band what it is. It's this sound and this production. I mean, because everything is like, there's bass in there, and the drums are there, and the vocals carry, and the song comes together, and everything's really cool. But then when his guitar tone stands out by itself, when it's all on its own, it's just like, ooh, oh honey, put that away. It's just like, get that back, get it back in there with the rest of the stuff, and so it's just kind of like I guess it's that part of me. It's like, boy, I would love to have heard this with a great production, because I don't think it would have ruined. I don't think it.
Oh no, it would have. No, it would have been fine either way.
Yeah, I think with some bands where, like, if you take away some of that,
Kellen is doubting that comment. He's looking at it like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I can see where you might want to disagree with that, but I think the songs and stuff. I think that the material is so well put together that a cool production with better tone and stuff. I think it would be cool to hear. I think it would be good. Would I don't know if it'd make me like it any more than I do maybe this record anyway, but again, that being said, it doesn't diminish the quality of the listening experience for me. I like this record, but it was just one of those things where it's like, when it would happen, it was just kind of like wince, and then you'd get into it and it's like, oh, this is actually pretty cool, and this is a cool song, but again too, I found myself more gravitating towards the acoustic stuff on this, and the more somber and emotional passages in this record. But still, the heavy stuff was cool. There's there's some double bass and stuff in here, so very cool. But again, I don't know. Is it a criticism, or is it just a point of like, did you notice that? Like, what the hell? So.
Kellen, since you had the face, we'll make you go next so you can kind of comment on that.
I mean, yeah, I would have a really hard time getting into a Manilla Road record that sounded differently. Like I think that's part of the appeal and what is eternal about this band, right? Like, what's the Indiana Jones scene where he's got to pick like the chalice from the Last Supper? And he first grabs the one and it looks like a perfect chalice, and of course it kills him, and then he gets the actual whatever. And you chose wisely, like yeah.
No, I think it's a good analogy.
Good analogy.
The entire point of this band is like the mid-range to treble is so unruly and sibilant, like. It is. I completely get it. It's piercing through. It sounds like it's sort of peaking, right? Like it's just cracking through the sound here. It's completely unhinged. A lot of the ways that you would sort out like guitar tone, lead, because he'll be ripping a solo on top of his own rhythm playing, right? So those two things combined, it gets like it turned into a wash at times. I actually think the mid-range to like lower aspect, like toms, bass, guitar, kick drum, that part of this record is full of life and weight. I love the bottom end of this record. The upper register, when you put like his vocals on top of it and the guitar wash, like it's completely wild and not sorted out well, right? Like trying to cleanly discern where parts of it are. And 100% of the attraction for me. I don't want to hear it any other way. And I would actually take issue. Which is why I sort of paused. I was like, man, I don't want to hear this with anything. And I could say the same thing with a lot of my favorite Kira Thungal records. I feel the same way. Like some of the guitar tone on those records are just very odd. Like someone from a prog generation trying to make a transition into a metal record.
And their gear's their gear. There was no amp sims to fix shit. This is my tone. Take it or leave it. This is my tone, you know?
Right. And it also, like, I mean, to your sort of blue collar aspect of this band, it just was like, this is who we are. Screw you. Like, I think that's part of the attraction. So, I several times during this course of this record, like I had the exact same sort of initial sort of impression listening to this. TJ was like, man, what the hell is this at times? But at the same time, you know, to your point, and I've had this several, like one of my favorite moments in all of Manilla Road's catalog is the title track off The Deluge, which comes in 3 parts. The Eye of the Storm is the first part of that and hits this kind of dreamy part, and then it rips into a solo, and it's just so wild and it perfect at the same time.
Big fan of Divine Victim on that album. I love that song.
I mean, yeah. I don't want to get distracted on The Deluge, but but I think one of the characteristics about this band that is undeniable, and to try and wash it away would steal a lot of the appeal for me, is the oddness of the production. Once I do really want to say, like, some of the toms on this record, the kick drums on it, I love the bottom end of this record. There's a great amount of like modern 2001 weight to it. The snare drum, though, there's a crack to it that feels to me a little bit tightly wound. I would like to loosen that up a little bit, but I'm nitpicking here.
But it cuts. You can hear it.
100% cuts, and it just feels, you know, like a live sort of experience as well. It just drives home like we're 100% a blue collar. This is who we are. Either you're about it or you're not, kind of deal.
Yeah. All right, Jim.
Yeah, it's so funny how I'm seeing like a pattern in the way that we're approaching this. You know, there's a line of connection between what TJ said and Kellen said on the production, and you know how, you know, when you as a metal fan, you may have a different expectation of what, you know, certainly in this style, what the production maybe should be in your head, and you don't get that. You get Manilla Road's production, and it could be off-putting at first, but then when you think back across their history, all the albums before, and whether you see it as a problem, a choice, or something in between, it whatever the reasons, quote unquote, there are for it, this is Manilla Road. That is how they present themselves, whether it was by limited resources or you know, intent, or just being one area of their expertise so focused on songwriting, maybe that area of, you know, attention got less focused. Whatever the reasons are, in the long run, doesn't matter. You know, rough production is just part of Manilla Road.
Well, they recorded everything themselves, and Mark at one point went through a divorce. So I think there was a financial impact in that transition. And after the stretch of records, the production got even worse. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No. My point is, though, it doesn't really matter. You know, and you know, this is just Manilla Road, and I do think it is a part of the identity of their albums. Now that doesn't mean, like, when we're going, you know, like Sea Witch is one of my favorite moments on this record, and when that goes into Resurrection, I really wanted it to come like super hard and heavy into that next song, like you know, pushing you know, as that Sea Witch builds up, and and it does in a different way. It does through the riffs and the vocals themselves, but not through the production of the instruments. It doesn't like they're not pushing out at you like I would expect it to happen on a more modern production of another band. And at first, like, my mind was like, oh, well, that's disappointing. I wanted to hear this in a different way. But that was just like the initial listen. After that, like I just, I was in that Manila Road mindset, and it just became, this is just a part of their album. And the weird thing is, even though, if we're just being objective about it, you can definitely say that the production on this and many other Manilla Road records is flawed. But when you listen to the records, you can't be objective if you like the music. You're going to be subjective, and you sense that sort of like, that's sort of like gray area of theirs when it comes to their studio work is almost like, a contributing member of the band in a way.
Yeah.
It adds to the color and the atmosphere of what they are. And, and that's not an apology. I'm not apologizing for Manilla Road's, whether intentional or not, quote unquote missteps in production. I just think that, not only does their songwriting overcome any maybe initially perceived inadequacies, but I actually think that they embrace those, whether intentional or not, and it becomes part of the fabric of their albums, and I kind of wouldn't have it any other way. I'm so used to Manilla Road just being Manilla Road and that being a part of it, that it would seem weird to me if it was like super clean and awesome and perfect. Metal began, in the factory town of Birmingham, arguably in 1970 in the UK, with a bunch of blue collar kids, making noise the best way they could, and that's sort of like
based on the blues. Their influences were also before metal.
Yeah. And I think that sort of like workmanlike approach to music, that blue collar approach to creating sound, and and the that downtrodden aspect of music, I think gives Manilla Road a purity that later bands with maybe more resources or experience in the studio lack, and that's why if I'm looking for an epic heavy metal album and I've got, Crystal Logic or Mystification to choose from or something more recent, it's going to be Manilla Road every time.
Yeah. Production wise, I mean, I get the sizzle. There's some sizzle in the guitar tone, but hearing how there's an album run, Voyager, Playground of the Damned, and Mysterium, very lo-fi productions, but all still good records. And this record sounds like it was produced by Bob Rock compared to those records. Let's be honest. And they always did their own stuff. I mean, Midgard Studios was him, I think. But anything that might be a little weird on this record, 40 seconds in the record, it doesn't matter. I'm acclimated to the sound. It's good. It's heavy. Like Kellen said, the bottom end is there. I like the fact that the bass, so you could tell there's some weird effect on the bass on some of these songs, and it's kind of a proggy. He did a lot of proggy bass. Again, bass players have always been really good in this band. I like how the drums cut, the guitars, they're where they're supposed to be. But for me, the two things that are always really good is the vocal production and the acoustic / clean elements of this record sound really good. And they sound really good. And when they flow into the heavy, there's no weird stutter step to get into it. It flows. this album flows like the concept of the record, like the water washing over, connecting the songs. The record flows, and from a guy, I listen to crappy lo-fi black metal like it's a-okay. So, less than perfect production is not a problem, unless in my head I think it's supposed to be a fancy production. But with Manilla Road, they never really presented that way to me. The blue collar, the working man's DIY aesthetic. I'm fine with this. Let's talk about least favorite songs. TJ shopping.
No, I'm just looking at something, but shop later. Again,
checking his OnlyFans page.
Yeah,
it's called Pickles and Gravy. Everybody go check it out. Pickles and Gravy with Chef Boyardee. OnlyFans.com.
You're just jealous.
He'll be here all night, folks. He'll be here all night
because I'm rich. So, again, for me on this record, I felt like the record did pick up a little bit more towards the middle to the end.
It gets heavier.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't, the opening track was kind of so. I didn't think it was all that strong. I like it. But I don't know. You move into Lemuria, I love that. I just think that's just a super inventive. It's very simple. He's just using a delay or something and maybe a little chorusing on it.
It's cool where the vocals come in too. It doesn't come in when you think it should. It's like all of a sudden here they are. But it's so well put together for just it's a very simple piece. He's just doing a finger tap thing, and it's just really well done. And then the Sea Witch, another acoustic, clean, very straight. It's very cool. But it goes into heavy. It goes into heavy with a big solo at the end.
Yeah, for sure. Decimation, it's very somber and tragic. And then I like the closer, the War of the Gods. It's real solid. And then the sound effects leading out of it, and exactly, Tim. But otherwise, those are kind of my favorites. I like the whole record. I don't really have anything real critical to say about any of the rest of it. Some samey riffs and things like that were kind of whatever, but by and large, I think the record's really solid front to back. So,
Jim.
Yeah, I'm with TJ. It's solid front to back. I really like this record a lot. And also my favorite tracks on this echo TJ's as well. We're kind of aligned here tonight, dude. Lemuria, Sea Witch,
it burns us precious.
I'm gonna put a little circle on the calendar by this day, this rare moment.
It'll be a day long remembered.
Exactly. But yeah, Lemuria, Sea Witch, their slower moments, their ballads are just really powerful, very emotive. I like I said earlier, when you can you tell a story but make someone feel it as well. That's just amazing. Flight of the Ravens, another great ballad. It's a combination of we're talking about Valhalla and Cthulhu or Cthulhu, however you want to pronounce it. Mark pronounces it Cthulhu here. Just really great lyrics. Powerful song. March of the Gods is an excellent follow up. The song sounds like the title. It is a march all the way through. There is a shredder of a solo at the beginning of that song. One of the best leads on the album, in my opinion. The only musically thing that I don't like is on Siege of Atlan, this screamy vocal. It just seems out of place here.
There's highlight. I see what you're saying.
That would be the one thing that I would take out. Like I didn't understand it, and I'm always like, wait, what's happening? That's the one moment on the album where I'm just like, I don't get that. And luckily, it's brief, and then the great vocals of Brian and Mark come in, and it just gets back to where it should be for a Manilla Road song. I think War of the Gods is a perfect closer. It builds and it builds. And then, at the end of it, the sample that kind of carries you out to the end of the record, I think it's perfectly placed. has a perfect mood to kind of set off the album and get you ready to start all over again and hit it again. So yeah, so those are definitely the highlights for me. Yeah, it's so yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out all of those songs. If I think those slower moments will kind of get you into what the capacity for emotion that Manila Road has.
Oh, it's
and
huge.
Yeah, exactly. And then songs like March of the Gods and Atlantis Rising and stuff will get you into the power that they convey. So.
All right, Kellen.
Okay, so kind of we're to some degree in agreement here. So Atlantis Rising, Resurrection is another one I want to highlight, and March of the Gods, I will agree. I think those 3 tracks for me encapsulate the best of this record. In terms of the songwriting and like consistent, all the different aspects of the band are well done here. But I do also want to highlight the Lumeria track. That's like a fever dream. Like I'm sitting in bed last night with my headphones on and that track comes on. I'd heard it several times, but it hit in a way like there are few moments for me where like the hair on the back of your neck sort of stands up. Like the opening synth on Symphonies of Sickness or the clean guitar line with the owls in the background on Anthems of the Welkin. Like there are a few moments on a record that I kind of like, I kind of feel like my body's collapsing in on itself because just what's going on. 100% that track. And I also want to say, Jim, you brought up like being able to distinguish Brian and Mark's vocals. I think they're both singing on that track, and you can hear when they're like one sort of fading and entering, like differences between them as vocalists on that track. But that's such a haunter of an, and it's kind of like both that and Flight of the Ravens, I think, do really well in terms of serving as like what do you want to call like a buoy in the middle of a record. Like they kind of these posts that you can build songs around, so it kind of comes in 3 acts. But yeah, that song every single time I kind of like brace because I know it's gonna like get underneath my skin a little bit. I really like Resurrection's got this sort of almost gallop to it. I really dig that track, and I agree with everything that you said about March of the Gods in terms of the soloing, and Atlantis Rising as the title track here works really well. So those are my 3 favorites, along with the Lumeria sort of interlude.
Man, this record rules. I love it so much. And Megalodon, I think you are right, actually, Kellen. The vocals by Darby Pentecost from the band Stomping Ground on there. And the cool thing is, he's not that far off the mark from Mark and Brian. He fits in perfectly. And he does do most of the song. When I saw him live, he did most of it, other than the choruses and stuff. But Megalodon, mission statement. That kind of sets the tone for the heavy stuff for me. I think it's a good start. Lemuria, I mean, the proggy guitar effects. I mean, I know I've been on a tirade lately about prog and death metal, prog, blah, blah, blah. But when it's done in a context that I like, I'm like, hey, prog, cool. I don't know. I love that guitar effect. And I've always loved, starting in the beginning of their career all the way to the end, Mark would always put either 12-string acoustic pieces or acoustic guitar or just clean guitar songs in. This Blessed Curse does that a lot, and also he has a solo album which I have on vinyl. It's great. It's all acoustic essentially. It's fantastic. If you like that side of Manilla Road, definitely check out Mark Shelton's solo album. It's really good. But I've always loved this side of the band, and it really highlights, I mean, there's emotion in the heavy stuff, but that acoustic stuff or the clean stuff really centers in on that. And it's like you could just it kind of like it's like the the 4th member of the band, really. The title track. It's another unwaveringly heavy and memorable song. Riffs flow effortlessly into massive hooks. Simplicity is the key. Sea Witch, oh my god, one of my favorites on here. Combines the quiet and emotive side of Manila Road, only to open up into the distortion. The song gets heavier and the solo work is smooth as silk. So much feeling on this one. Emotion is a big part. Exactly. I'm the selective prog dork. And I don't know, we won't get into that here, but Resurrection. This song is a special song for me because none of you guys brought it out, but to me, it sounds like Mark on the lead vocals here with his gristled wizard style. I love the slide guitar on this one. I don't know if you guys noticed. It's a slide. He's like got one of those things.
Yeah, it's called a slide.
Yeah, it's a slide. It's all over this song. I love it, and it adds a really unique element which really isn't explored ever in metal. This is cool that he brought it out on here. I thought it was kind of a cool touch to this song. Like all the heavy
what
songs.
You're telling me is I should buy a slide and bring it to practice?
If you could do it that good, yeah. But if you suck at it, no. Like all the heavy songs
that's
on here.
Purely subjective, huh?
You could do TJ is you could let Marty bring it, and then you could just do whatever he did and bring yours next time around.
There it is.
TJ would show
cost more.
I would, yeah. Marty will bring his tin one, and I'll buy the glass one.
TJ would come up with a hairless cat, stick his finger in it, and go up and down the string. Wait a minute. Anyway, I don't know. Resurrection, I think it's a perfectly constructed and memorable track. Decimation, great riffage, heavy as hell and interesting. Brian takes a more aggressive stance vocally on here with screams and a darker tone. Oh my God. Flight of the Ravens, acoustic track, colorful and unique with great singing. March of the Gods, another favorite on here. The riff work gets far more soaring and epic on this track. Bass lines pop through, kind of a proggy bass line comes through. Heavy progression with flowing melody over the top. Love the verse riff and vocal lines / performance. Sounds like Shelton on vocals here. Siege of Atlan might be my favorite song on the album. Most aggressive track. Screams in the riff. The riff has more of a dissonance to it. Some double bass work. It's the fastest, most punishing song. In the intro part of the song, it's kind of a complex structure. The intro doesn't really repeat. Opens up into epic verse and chorus. Manilla Road showing their teeth on this one. Shelton on vocals, I would guess. War of the Gods, Shelton on vocals. Album ends on a massively epic note. Mighty verse and chorus sails into an amazing solo before repeating the chorus and then ending with that cool sample. Man, this album is awesome. Judgment, final thoughts, Kellen.
Awesome, buy it. I love this band. Knew I would enjoy this record.
Had you heard this record before this point?
Yeah. So my Manilla Road story is in 2007. Manilla Road is quoted on Dark Throne's Raised on Rock.
Yeah.
It's like the gatekeeper's anthem. Yeah. Anyway, but someone recommended I listen to Spiral Castle, and then I kind of got in the later part of the band, I should say. So I actually was introduced to the 21st Century Manilla Road before I jumped back to Crystal Logic and stuff. But
me too, more or less, other than that mixtape. Yep.
Yeah, the problem with Manilla Road records is there are a lot of really, really good Manilla Road records.
There's some crappy ones though. There's a couple of bad ones.
Sure, but
like
not many. Out of 18, like you could get 14 and be
16. I'd say 16. I mean, of course, of Chaos. I mean,
go lower.
They're all worth here.
There's a lot of bad ones too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Spiral Castle or Architect. No, the one, the Shelton glam metal one is not good. Spiral Architect.
Right. I mean, like I could get, but Crystal Logic through
Is that the name of it?
Courts of Chaos you could go with all of those, and then you could pick up from there from Atlantis Rising. all the
Circus
way-
Maximus. I'm sorry. Circus Maximus is the
Yeah.
crappy one. Anyway,
Right.
go ahead.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just there's at least, 10 almost mandatory. So anyway, I this is an amazing record. I really, really loved listening to it this past week. But the first thing I want to do is listen to this one and then listen to 10 others. So
Yeah, me too. I'm about to hit the marathon for sure.
okay, but if I know one of the, and we can kind of add in here, one of the things that people will constantly sort of question is where do you start with this band? And if you were to start with Atlantis Rising, it wouldn't be a bad place to start. So
Knowing you got to know the stuff that came before it is kind of their formative years, though. I mean, that's
right.
Most everybody, like TJ, his first Manilla Road record is Crystal Logic, and that is the standout record. That's the severe transitional, and there's some great, amazing songs on there.
Right, but this wouldn't turn anyone off, right?
Right.
You could listen to this record and get into the band. So for sure.
But you look at Crystal Logic, you got songs like Feeling Free Again. That's kind of like holding on to their first album,
Right.
part of metal.
They're moving out of their prog stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Jim. Did you go already, TJ? Did I get you already? No.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
I have no idea what's going on.
I don't know either.
I think it's glaringly obvious. I love this record. I love this band. This would be a good place to start. If you got used to this, then either harder to take vocals of Crystal Logic would be the next step, because that's absolutely essential. I think Crystal Logic.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I'm just going to keep this simple. You guys have heard me, gush about this album now for an hour and a half. So I'm just going to say it's 9 out of 10 for me, and like every good Manilla Road is 9 or 10 out of 10. So
right on. TJ.
I suppose I give this record a 6 out of 7 layer spinach artichoke dip in a bread bowl.
All right. For me, 9 out of 10 record all day long. I love it. I love Manilla Road, and I'm really thankful, as a couple friends that were urging me to check these guys out, sent me mixtape, and then I just had to get there from there. But once I did, it was like, holy crap, what a revelation. What a fun, awesome, emotional, emotive, rocking, great band. Sounds like no one else. Gotta love them. And if you like this album, I would recommend Gates of Fire, another album no one really talks about much. It's got a similar, it seems like the production on this one's maybe a bit better, but God, there's a song on here. If you like the acoustic stuff like Lemurian, there's a song on here, the second song on the album called Behind the Veil. Wow. What an amazing Shelton acoustic song. It is fantastic. It's worth the price of admission on here. There's a song on here called Rome. Brian does some King Diamond type vocals on here on occasion. My least favorite song on the album, but this is a great record as well. I mean, you could throw a dart at a board with Manilla Road records and hit a good one, but that's it. We got through that. And thank you guys for humoring me. I picked an album I've been in the mood to listen to, so it was kind of a pleasure for me. Like I said, I've spun this easily 20 times this week, and I'll probably spin it again this week before I put it back away. But next week, it'll be Kellen's last week before his little vacation from us. We wore him out, apparently, everybody. So he's going to be gone for a couple weeks after next week. But
another German thrash marathon. Just
here it comes. You're muted.
I just got one question for you guys. Are you damned in hell?
Yeah. I've listened to that.
I brought it up, and so he brings it out. Killer.
That's right. The credit goes to TJ for he just mentioned the title a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh yes.
And I gotta say, man, that's a great pick, because Venom is a satanic panic band for me, And fall time and Venom always fit really well. I always like listening to Venom in the fall. I don't know.
Yeah.
Halloween, it's just the whole vibe. You know, I dig it.
Oh hell yeah, yeah. This is definitely a perfect album for Halloween, and definitely for me a satanic panic band, and as well. You know, I mean, these lyrics. It's one thing to be satanic and to be screaming or growling, and people can understand what you're saying. But when you can understand every single word that this guy is spouting off, this the utter shrieking blasphemy on here, like. As a 14-year-old or whatever it was when I first heard this, like it was jarring, but I was like, I fucking love it.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about this.
No, that'd be a great one to talk about. That'd be so much fun. Absolutely. Yeah, show notes. I won't be here Friday. I already talked about the beginning of the show. Alan will be here with Lazarus and Aaron, the metal theologian. I think they're discussing the year 1982 in metal. So expect a lot of flexing between all three of them, showing off their rare and new wave of British heavy metal singles, and it'll be a fun one. Anybody have anything coming up they want to talk about?
Oh yeah, you know me. I'm just loaded down with projects and stuff, and I'm just going to be cleaning the shed and making room for my bikes, and I have to corpse a plastic skeleton. I have got that coming up, so that'll be a fun project.
What?
It's for my grandkids' Halloween costume. I'm building. I think I told you this. I'm building them a road warrior Jeep, and there's going to be a burned hostage hanging off the front, and so I got this 4-foot tall skeleton, and I'm gonna you got to wrap it in plastic and melt it with a heat gun, and then gonna build a rack in the front so they can hang off there, and it'll be all burnt and whatever, and then dress them up like a couple little mongrels, and then send them out into the in the Jeep. So
I gotta say,
fun.
You have to mention the fact that metalheads are an artsy craftsy bunch. But, yeah.
You think that's cool? You should see my lamp collection.
Lamps and leatherworking by Tej. Curious Curios. Yeah. Anyway, all right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a good, fun time as always, and we will be back next Wednesday with a little talk about Venom, which is going to be a lot of fun. And we will see you next week. Review on Monday. I don't know. I'm going to be in the woods up in the UP all weekend. I'm getting home late on Sunday, so maybe not. There might not be a review this week. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, cheers, everybody. We'll see you later. Have a good one.